talk about your shit. There's too many people committing suicide. There's too many people living in a fucking basement because they can't rationalize their own stuff. That's leadership to me.
Yeah.
Talk to people.
I think that's the challenge to leave everybody with is I think that sometimes as leaders we can't figure out who we can safely talk to. Hey everybody, I'm Eric Oberempt and you're listening to Be Authentic or Get the Fuck Out. We talk about real shit, what's on our minds, and don't give a fuck if it makes you feel a little uncomfortable. So sit back, strap in, and get ready for some real shit. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Be Authentic or Get the Fuck Out. I'm your host, Eric Oberempt. We are here at RoofCon 5, so please try and ignore the background noise that is happening. We are doing our best to make sure that the audio is as crisp as possible, but understand we are on a trade show floor, so it does get a little noisy every once in a while. Today is our first interview on the floor, and I'm super excited about this interview. We've had a couple of back and forths. He's got a really interesting story and some really interesting things that he's passionate about. So I'd like to introduce my guest today, Daniel Hrabowski.
Hrabowski.
I said it right.
You did. First time go.
I always get nervous.
People's last names are...
Yes.
And sometimes their first names. We'll talk about that at some point.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, man.
No, this is great. I appreciate being able to sit down and have this conversation with you.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. I know we've been trying to make it happen for a little while now, and this just works out really well, being in the same place, in the same moment in time. We went back and forth a couple of times, and I know that you are very passionate about PTSD and trauma and things like that. You've got a military background.
Yes.
Can you kind of tell people a little bit about why that's important to you?
So it's important to me specifically because I boycotted it for so long. I was very anti-veteran, right? It's what I mean by that.
What?
Anti-veteran.
Okay.
Being a veteran, I didn't want the spotlight. I didn't want people to associate me with being a veteran, and so I was in before September 11th. I did 3 years in Iraq, 1 year in Afghanistan. I got medicaled out, didn't want to get out. And so I had a bunch of frustration and angst and disdain for all of that for a long time. And so when we would be out in public and they'd be like, hey, thank you to all of our veterans, or if you're a veteran, stand up, I didn't want to participate in those things. So I was mad about it. And I realized over time that was my PTSD kind of manifesting itself in that capacity, right? And so then I shifted, and now I'm very pointed in advocating for PTSD and trauma and survivor's guilt and all of the things that come along with that, because I realized I was cloaking that for myself for so long that I have an opportunity to be a voice to help people, and now.
So how did it manifest in you?
I had a full-on PTSD driven break. I had sitting on my back porch, bawling my eyes out. My wife come out and she's like, what's going on? It was the first
Which
time.
wife?
My wife, the one that's here.
Okay.
Which, fair question.
We'll get into that. Yeah.
So I couldn't express to her what was wrong. All I could tell her was that it was quiet. All I could tell her was that I can't pinpoint it. And I realized that was it. And then I had one of my friends commit suicide, and it was like, okay, I have to do something.
How did that affect you?
Oh, that one hurt. So you have to understand, that was on a run so I have 4 names on my bracelet. And if you ever see these black bracelets, it's always service members who lost somebody, right? So there's 4 names on it, and each person on here died differently. So I have one on here that passed away from complications over multiple deployments. 20 years later, finally got him. I have the buddy of mine that committed suicide. I have a buddy of mine that OD'd on heroin, trying to help somebody else get to rehab. And then one that died in my arms while I was in Iraq. So the last one was my buddy committing suicide. And I had talked to him a few months prior. He got in his car, drove out to a bridge, never called anybody, sat out there for hours, and then decided to jump. Didn't call anybody. Didn't reach out, didn't tell anybody he had a plan, So sat out there for hours, and the magnitude of loneliness that existed there and helplessness and all of that, that's what got me. That's what fucked me up. And that one took me a long time to rationalize, and I'm still angry about it.
Was it because you could understand that loneliness feeling?
I can, but not to that degree.
Not to that degree.
So fortunately for me, like the suicide conversation has never been a thing for me, but I know so many of my friends that I deployed with, that I went to war with, that is at least crossed their mind, right?
Because I think that when people think of PTSD, like uneducated people maybe, right? They think of shit in a movie where people have flashbacks to being in war and like being shot at, right? And like loud noises and like, right? And like visions and all that kind of stuff. Like, is that a real thing, or is that, or is that the movie version of what people are really going through?
It is. There's the hypersensitivity and the hypervigilance to things absolutely is a thing. But it's an element of it, right? And it's honestly, it's a small element.
That's what
it's usually the trigger to something else, right? So I know the first couple years after I got out, the loud noises, the being shocked or being surprised, I would very quickly get past that, but then the rest of the day was fucked, right? It just kind of kills your mood, lets all the air out of your sails. If you were being productive, you're not going to be productive the rest of the day. So there is an element of that. I think the Hollywood version is dramatized, obviously, but those things exist.
Yeah.
PTSD more often than not manifests itself, at least in my experience and the conversations that I have, very similar to people who are running at a high level of anxiety all the time. It's that volatile, I don't know which version of this person I'm going to get. Am I going to set this person off? Are they going to lose their shit over something relatively minor? Right. That's usually what it is. But there's also the element of the depression side of it. There's the element of the survivor's guilt is a bitch. I mean, that one, to me, that's the worst one for me.
So was the friend dying in your arms the worst one?
I think...
Did that give you survivor's guilt?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Because I had lost guys that I knew. I mean, you do 4 years in combat, you're going to lose people.
Right.
This one was a bit different because I was on the ground with her, myself and a lieutenant, and then Doc got there. It fucked me up because we called for a medevac. We were in the middle of a firefight. The medevac couldn't come in because that landing zone was hot, too hot for a bird. So then we had to redirect to a casevac, which is the same thing, but it's a ground. It's a Humvee coming in, right? And she died 30 seconds before the casevac showed up. And that one sucked a lot. And that was, what, 13 years ago. And it's still, you don't ever get over it.
And if the bird could have got there?
She probably would have made it. She caught a piece of shrapnel behind the ear. Part of her brain was sticking out, but she was talking to me.
Really?
Yep. Fully conscious, scared shitless, right? Because she got dropped. There's a firefight going on around her. There's me and another person on the ground that are trying our best to help her.
Yeah.
And I remember her, she kept asking me, she's like, Sergeant, am I going to make it? Sergeant, am I going to make it? And that's a normal conversation. Find anybody who's been on the ground with somebody who is dying.
Right.
They're constantly asking you, am I going to make it? Am I going to be okay? And you're lying straight face to this person.
For sure.
And you know you are. And then when they don't make it, when they make it, you just kind of brush that one off. Yeah. And you're like, whew, all right, dodge the bullet. When they don't make it, the rest of your life, you're telling yourself, the last thing that I said to this person, it was a lie. And you go, they know it. They knew I was fucking lying.
Right.
Part of her brain was sticking out of her skull, right? But she looked at me, eye contact. I had another one of my guys there trying to keep her heart rate up, and his adrenaline was so high, he couldn't tell the difference between his heartbeat and hers when he was trying to hold. And I had to remove him.
Yeah.
I go back to my guys afterwards, covered in blood. They tackle me to the ground and they're like, are you good? I'm like, it's not mine, just leave me alone. I need a few minutes to process what the fuck was going on. And then I had to immediately turn all of that off and be a leader
Right.
to these guys who had no bearing that she just died. They didn't know. And they
still had to lead inside of chaos.
Yeah. And so I had to turn all that off, and then I had to direct these guys, right?
Fuck.
So you're compounding so many highs and lows in such a tight period of time, and it's all masked by adrenaline. So when that adrenaline wears off and you come down,
Oh, shit.
so you want to talk about addiction?
Yeah.
Be addicted to adrenaline.
Right.
That's statistically, that's why so many of these guys
So when they come back, they're looking for that.
all the time. There are so many studies. These guys that go out and they get in a motorcycle accident, racing their crotch rocket, doing 160, jumping out of airplanes, cliff diving, four-wheeler accidents, boxing,
You gotta fucking
MMA.
substitute it for something.
You have to, because there is not a substance on the planet that matches adrenaline at all.
What branch were you in?
I was in the Army.
You're in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you were in, where were you? Did you say you were in Iraq?
So I did Iraq in 03. So the initial invasion, we were the first aviation unit to cross. I was in Apache helicopter battalion. We were the first aviation unit to cross in 03. I went back to Iraq in 05. I did Afghanistan in 08, and then back to Iraq in 09. And then got medicaled out in 12.
Medicaled out. Because,
So I hurt my back in 2010.
Okay.
The Army said, "Hey man, it's been real. See you later."
I always wanted to ask somebody like a very pointed, question of like, we all watch the movies, right? We all watch things, and you think that you understand what people go through, when they're over there and you're in a fucking firefight, right?
Right.
I mean, we're literally like, you're sitting there and it's like life, death, life, death, life, death, right? I mean,
The thing is, you don't think about it.
but
though.
you can't think about it,
No.
right? When the first time, because you go through training, you go through all this stuff that you have, you go through all this stuff, all the training, boot camp, all the shit, and then you show up.
Right.
And my guess is that no matter what fucking training you've been through, it's never what the fuck they said it was
No.
going to be, right?
No.
And the first time you fire your weapon has to be almost surreal.
Yes. So there's a bunch of studies that show, and I'm going to be off on my numbers, but a very high percentage, call it 80% of people will never pull the trigger once. Never. Because even in a moment where they need to,
Right.
they won't. Of the 20% that do, like 90% of those people will never pull it a second time because of the impact of the first one.
Really?
Yep. And so if you start to put that in perspective, right, there's a handful of memories that every service member has. The day they arrived at basic training, the gas chamber, because you go through that as part of training, like they want, it's just CS, it's riot gas.
Right. It's not the Nazis' gas chamber.
Right.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not
Just so
Auschwitz.
everybody's clear.
It's not Auschwitz.
Auschwitz, yeah.
But then the first time you get shot at, the first time you shoot at somebody, in the event that you kill somebody, and the first time that you lose somebody.
Right.
Every service member remembers those, right? And I remember the first time I pulled the trigger like it was yesterday. And the first time I pulled the trigger in combat was on a 50 cal. It was not with my M4.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so completely different dynamic. It was also the first time that I think, and this is the fun part, right? When you're shooting a crew serve weapon, you don't know if you hit somebody, right? You can assume safely that you did,
Right.
right? There's some safety and sanctity in not knowing whether you did or
Of
not,
course.
right? For your own
how could
sanity.
there not be? Yeah.
But I remember the first time I saw somebody die. It was a kid in Iraq. First person I ever saw in my life die was a child. Talk about just things that fuck you up, right?
Die from.
Got run over by a truck.
Got run over by a truck
Yep.
like a dog.
Yeah. So we used to, when we would go on convoys, we would take the MREs, and everybody had shit in the MREs they didn't like. And as we would go on convoys, we'd go through these villages and we would throw out the shit that we didn't like. I was the third truck in the convoy. I watched the gunner of the first truck sling out something from the MRE to the kids. The wind caught it and brought it back into the convoy, and I watched all these kids run out, and the second truck and myself are screaming at these kids to get back, and this little girl never broke eye contact with that thing, ran out,
Oh my
bump,
God.
behind the trucks.
Oh, it's
and
one of your guys' trucks.
yeah, and that was the first.
Fuck.
That was the first experience with death at 19 years old. 2 weeks into combat. And the expectation for people to come out of those things and be
Hold
fine.
on. I gotta ask one more question.
Yeah.
Do you stop?
No. And that's the thing.
Because you can't.
You're not allowed to have an emotional response at that time. You have to just keep going.
moving forward.
Stopping and standing still are the two biggest things that get people
Right.
killed, right?
That's how you get shot at.
Yeah. So, and I'm in a weird space too because I was a quartermaster. When I joined the Army, there was never an expectation that I was going to be in combat. But when you get into a wartime scenario, supplies move, right?
Right.
How do they move? They move via convoys. What are people attacking? The supply lines.
Right.
All of a sudden, all these people that thought that, well, I'm a supply clerk, I'm a cook, I'm a mail person, they're like, those are the people getting fucked up all the time. Your combat arms guys are doing what they were trained to do. They're kicking indoors, they're, doing route clearance, they're doing that shit. You had 80% of the military that all of a sudden had to learn how to actually be in combat for the first time.
Wow. Because it's funny when you brought up the stat about how many people have actually fired their gun, because I just started rewatching Band of Brothers in the Pacific.
Great series.
But
both of those are good series.
Amazing, and they're the same, but they're so different. Right. And I'm just finishing up watching Pacific again, and I don't know if you remember the scene, but there was a scene where the guy that ended up getting the Medal of Honor while he was over in the Pacific.
Yeah.
And he was a machine gunner, and just the fucking swarms of Japanese that were like coming in on their location, and he's sitting there with that fucking machine gun, literally just fucking mowing them down.
Yeah.
And then had to have the foresight to realize that he literally made a pile of Japanese that he had to fucking run out and shed the Japs to make the pile smaller so that they couldn't use it as a hill to hide behind to fucking shoot them.
Right.
So he went and fucking shed the mountain of Japanese so that he could shoot more of the Japanese. And I'm like, and this motherfucker isn't going pop, pop, pop.
Yeah, no, he's
it's fucking another. And I think about that, like, it's like you said, you're shooting from a helicopter, whatever, like you can detach maybe a little bit, right?
A little bit.
But like then they get done, like those guys back then, and they wake up or smoke clears and they have to go walk it.
Yeah.
And you see that scene of 2,000.
Yeah.
Right?
And
the point of that statement was war's different.
Oh, 100% it
now,
is. World War II, Korea, that was a completely different beast, right? And you gotta remember then.
But could you imagine if that was today's wars?
Oh, we'd be screwed. The generation of service members now, we're fucked.
Yeah.
But, and I mean that with the most respect, these guys
we're not built for that kind of war.
No, these guys would leave for 3 and 4 years at a time. That's all they knew was war. Now my generation went a year at a time.
Okay.
Right? So the newer generation, Air Force, Marine Corps, I think they still do shorter deployments. The Navy, obviously ship time. The Army, I think, still does 12 months. But there's a massive difference in a 12-month deployment and a 4-year deployment.
Yeah.
Right? So, fun fact, so the first Band of Brothers was the story of the 101st Airborne. I was in the 101st for 10 years.
No shit.
So I've actually met I've met Colonel Winders, I've met some
Really?
of those, yeah, super awesome.
When did he pass?
Oh shit.
Because they filmed that in 2001.
Yeah, I met him.
He didn't have much more time left.
No, I met him in 03, and I think it was like 04, 05 he probably passed.
Really?
Yeah.
How was that? What was that like?
Surreal.
To meet him?
So being at the 101st, there's a ton of those guys. So meeting Colonel Winters, I met Chief Durant from Black Hawk Down. 160th was our sister unit. The Black Hawk Down guys were our sister unit. So we would run pink teams with them. So we'd have an Apache helicopter and then their little birds. So we did a bunch of missions with them.
Really?
Yeah. And
that was a true story, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Down?
Yeah. And probably one of the most realistic.
So that's what I heard.
Movies.
Like one of the most like realistic, like dialed in, truthful.
Yes. Hurt Locker was really good, with the exception of him going to like the Iraqi whorehouse and shit. The combat element.
Why? Because they don't go to Iraqi whorehouses, or they don't have them.
They have them.
Okay.
There's never a scenario where somebody just walks up to the gate and he's like, "Hey, I was just banging Iraqi hookers, let me back in." It's not happening.
That doesn't happen. Okay.
No. So they had to Hollywood it a little bit.
Sure.
But the combat elements in that movie
were
spot on.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see the confusion and chaos in that movie, because the Mike Tyson quote about everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yep.
The same applies for bullets.
Sure.
So I've seen some of the baddest motherfuckers I've ever seen in my life when a bullet whizzes by, lose their shit,
Sure.
and they are incapable of movement.
Right.
And I've seen guys that you would have never guessed would even have the fortitude to even stand up. I had a kid in my unit, his last name was Moffat, real quiet. We always thought he was gonna be the reason we all got shot.
Yeah.
We got pinned down in a firefight, middle of the desert. We no reason to expect any enemy activity at that time. Crew serve gunner gets shot, drops into the truck, he's dead. All of a sudden we hear the 50 cal light back up. It's a very distinct sound. Thump, 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 thump. We look up and it's Moffat, just letting her eat, just laying hate downrange. And he ran out of cans and he's like, I need more cans. And we're just feeding this dude.
Dude, it's always the guy in anything that always steps up that you never fucking expect.
Yep. And
Right?
and that's what makes it hard being in a leadership position there.
You don't know.
Because you don't know how people
Yeah.
are going to react. You can train them. I was that guy. At 19 years old, if you'd have told me that I was going to go to war,
Right.
I would have been like, psh, okay.
Right.
If you were going to tell me how I would react in combat, I'd have been like, no, that's not me.
So were you surprised how you reacted in combat?
100%. I'll be honest with
Because you reacted well?
Yes, I thought I'd be a bitch about it. I
Really?
thought when bullets started flying that I was going to be a pussy and I was going to find the first place to hide and other people were going to handle it for me.
Really?
Yep.
Why do you think that?
I wasn't raised in a space where confrontation was a thing. I wasn't raised in a space, I was in 2 fights in high school. And both those fights were with friends, right? So like the idea of confrontation and adversity and the austere situation, like never even crossed my mind. When I joined the Army, it was before September 11th. I wanted college money and I wanted a secure paycheck.
Right.
Right? I was in my 3rd week of basic training when the towers fell. And they said, hey, all you guys, it's all fucked. It's all fucked now.
Fuck, I didn't think about that.
I went to basic on August 15th. The towers fell on September 11th. I was halfway through.
I mean, was your whole year, like, was everybody just like, what the fuck did we do?
Yes.
Or,
We had a bunch of guys go AWOL.
oh, did you?
Oh, yeah. Now, they all got caught.
Because it could go the other way, too, of like, this is why I'm here.
Nobody that was in when I started was like, I'm doing this for the greater good and for the service of my country. We can all believe that we did, right? We can look back at it and make up the bullshit story that we did.
Right.
We did not. There's not a single person that I was in basic training with that was like, for the love of our country. Not a single one. It was for college money. It was to get out of a shitty situation because they're from shithole town in Wyoming.
Yeah.
Right? It was all very self-fulfilling, right? It was all very selfish. And then the towers fell and everything went to shit.
Shit got real.
Yep. Look, when I started basic, we were still doing nuclear fallout training from Vietnam era.
Get the fuck out.
No, we were reading manuals from the 60s that said if in the event of a nuclear blast, lay down, face the blast, and cover your head. We were doing that. And then the towers fell. Anybody who had family in New York City, they made fall out to a different place, and they're like, listen, they told them, all of a sudden everybody's crying. We don't even know what the hell's going on. We're watching all these grown-ass men bust into tears because it was family. If they were from New York City, they had family in New York City. And then they came over to us, the rest of us, and they said, if you're going to the 101st, 82nd, 7th Cav, 3rd ID, a couple of these bigger units, they're like, fall out over here. And then the drill sergeants came over to us and they're like, you guys are all fucked. You are all going to be dead by the end of the year.
Oh.
And we're like, what? What happened? And they're like, terrorist attack New York City, blah, blah, blah. And then they took
They
a
just
bunch.
came in and said, you're all going to be dead?
Yeah. 100%. They're like, you're fucked. You're dead. You're not making it to Christmas. Like, oh.
So tell me from a leadership standpoint, what was the purpose of saying it that way?
You have to realize at that point so the first, everything in basic goes in phases, right? So you can tell, because everything's color coded, because they have to Barney proof everything, right? So you do red phase, white phase, blue phase, and you carry a guide on.
No blackface.
No black.
Okay.
So good call. Everybody has a guide on, a flag that they march with, and you can tell where they're at in terms of progress by the color of their guide on, right? So we were just starting white phase. All of red phase.
Phase.
Yeah, you
Sorry,
thought. Yeah,
I
no.
was face. I was like, good job.
So red phase is nothing but tearing you down. You're a piece of shit. You're never going to amount to anything. Your parents didn't fucking love you. Like,
So you were just
we were
transitioning.
like a week into the second part of that. So then it become, hey, you're a piece of shit, but we can do things with you, right? So now it's like the start of build up. But then the towers fell, and they're like, you know all the stuff we were saying? You're still a fucking turd. You're never going to amount to. And so, luckily for me, when I got through basic, and I got through my individual training, and I got to Fort Campbell, my unit was off cycle. So the division was already deployed to Afghanistan when I got there. So I missed the 01 Afghanistan deployment. So then when the 03 Iraq deployment came up, they said, see you later, you're number one. And so my first 2 deployments I did not as an NCO, as a sergeant, as a non-commissioned officer. My second 2 I did as an NCO. So I had 2 years of combat time experience when I took guys to war. It is a massively different dynamic when you get to look all these guys' wives and mothers and kids, be like, hey, I'm gonna make sure they come home. And then you don't bring them all home, and you have to, they're holding you accountable. So again, you wanna talk about triggers that manifest PTSD. Have somebody's family member look you in the face and tell you that you're the reason that their family member didn't come home.
Dude, I don't know how I would do that.
You apologize.
Other than the fact that you have to.
You apologize. It's all you can do. Because I can't relate to the trauma that you're going through. It's like telling
and
somebody
they
who's
genuinely, probably not all of them, but like you at least feel like they genuinely blame you.
I look at it like this. They have to blame somebody. I'll burden that. I'll carry that burden.
But you can only carry it for so long.
I only have to carry it for so long.
Okay.
Right? Once.
But my guess is that some people don't know that.
Right. Their expectation is you're going to carry that forever.
Right.
Right? You can only fit so much shit in your box. Right? At some point, you got to start taking some stuff out.
Yeah.
And I've always been the person that, like, when one of our guys dies, they call me first. I can go back and tell you the phone calls that I've gotten for 7 or 8 of our guys that I have went to war with. When they died, somebody from their family called me, and then I got to be the one to disperse it to everybody. And I'm willing to do that, right? It's just the position that I found myself in. I didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
But I also did more combat time than a lot of the guys that I went to war with, right? So
man,
the burden never goes away. And so when you start to put all those things in one place, you have to make a choice and say, okay, I'm going to recuse myself from this, or I'm going to inundate myself with this. And I have found inundating myself with it is better for my psyche, even on the days that it's not, right? The overall is better.
So I've noticed, like, I've got different trauma, let's call it, right, than you do, with different recovery things that I went through and hurt people. And I know how that damaged a lot of my previous relationships.
Oh, yeah.
Is that something that you can relate to?
Oh, 100%. When you go into the military, you lose friends when you come out of basic because they've tore all of the bad habits out of you and you see things differently for the first time in your life, right? Think about if you knew somebody your entire life and at 18 years old you went in the military and they told you for 10 weeks everything that you knew was wrong, you need to be this person. Because your perspective changed, you're going to lose friends. So from the day you join, you're losing friends.
Right.
Go to war and come back.
Were you married when you went in?
No, I was single. I got married to my high school sweetheart before I deployed the first time. Went through both deployments. She cheated on me. We got divorced. Got remarried. Went through 2 more deployments with that wife. She cheated on me. Got divorced. Met my wife now after my 4th deployment. I think the reason that we've been able to be together for 12 years is because she didn't have to go through that version. But what she had to go through was the baggage, the bullshit, the depression and the anger and the PTSD nightmares and the not wanting to be in public, right? So if I don't want to be around me, why would anybody else want to be around me? Right? And she stuck through it.
And she stuck through it.
Years. That woman is the greatest thing that ever happened.
Why?
No, I don't want to fucking know. Hell no.
I knew where she at.
I don't know. She's wandering around here somewhere. I don't want to know. Because the hardest thing for veterans, and this is, I always say trauma's trauma. Your trauma is no different than my trauma with one exception. We are taught to never identify it the whole time you're in the military. Fuck your trauma, fuck your feelings.
Yeah.
Suck
Put
it
it in
up.
the fucking box. We got shit to do.
Yep.
Let's go.
So it's a lot of times it's hard not to identify that as a failure sometimes because who do I talk to about it?
So, wow. So that's a big deal. If we
And I could be completely wrong about that.
No. But if we shift the conversation a little bit to, I talk about this with leaders in business, right? Because I have that same I had somebody ask me the other day how I was doing. And I was like, I literally stopped and I went, what? And they're like, how are you doing? And I'm like, with what? And they're like, no, in general, like, how are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. Nobody asked me that.
Yeah.
Right? No, I ask everybody else that because
Right.
it's my job to find out how are you doing? How can I lift you up? How can I make you better? But as a leader and an owner, right? Nobody
looks up.
You don't
Yeah.
have that, right? And I'm like, I don't know. My literal answer was, I don't really know, man. I don't really have the luxury of worrying about how I'm doing.
Right.
Because I have shit to fucking get done.
Yep.
I don't get to sit in the corner of my bedroom and fucking cry that I didn't make a sale today.
Right.
Because I've got these people that are responsible for me.
Yeah.
And I don't get to fucking hide.
Right.
Right? Whatever I'm going through has to be locked in a fucking box because I don't have anybody to talk to about that.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not trying to relate my fucking whiny bullshit
But it
to
is.
that.
But it's the same. That's my point. The only difference between trauma from abuse, from addiction, from fucking Stockholm syndrome, whatever that trauma is, the only difference between that trauma and combat trauma is that these people were told from day one, you're going to experience this trauma and you're not going to get to talk about it.
Right.
These people weren't. That is the only difference. Trauma is trauma. And
That's just a really, I don't know why, just like that was a really big revelation to me because I didn't think of it in that context. And I've thought about it in my context for me, but never in like how you guys have to box it up in the moment too. But it like translates to anybody that is a leader in anything because again, to kind of wrap up, this conversation is when you were talking about that first time you get punched in the fucking face, the first time that a bullet fucking whizzes by you. Go back to Black Hawk Down, right? When did everything fucking crumble? When the guy fucking dropped off the fucking line.
Step one. Yep.
Step one, dropped off the fucking line, and everything fucking goes to shit.
Yep.
Right? Who's performing
Yep.
in the chaos and can fucking focus and not listen to the noise.
Right.
Because there's so much fucking noise going on, and if you get everybody to shut the fuck up and listen, right? So that we can actually direct traffic and tell people what needs to be done, we can accomplish things. But if the leaders freeze up, everybody's fucked.
Oh yeah.
In life, business, personal, and war.
The moment that you let your emotion dictate your decision, it's all fucked.
You're done.
Done.
What I try to teach is we have to make every decision at zero.
Oh, yeah.
We have to make every decision at level, and how we have to. But the challenge in that is how the fuck do we get back down there? Because we're going to have adrenaline.
Yeah.
We're going to have cortisol levels fucking shoot through the roof. We're going to have all these things happen in that moment. How do we bring our brain back to here? Because if we make an emotional decision here and we're high and we're happy or whatever, probably the wrong fucking decision. And if we make it when we're here and we're sitting in the corner of our room crying about something, wrong fucking decision.
Yeah.
Right? The only time we're able to make proper decisions in anything and execute is when we figure out how to be at level.
Yeah.
And if we can teach people how to do a breathing technique or whatever it is, right? Something to figure out how the fuck do we get back to here.
Right.
Now all of a sudden you're at a different level of leader.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, 100%. My version of that for us is a 6. Everything should be done at a 6. A steady
you go.
6 all the time. On a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
You're just above like meh. You're not depressed.
Right.
You're not excited. A steady 6
and I
all
just
the
call
time.
it 0.
Yeah, no, it's the
because
same,
if we're
same thing.
Yeah, because if we're +2, you're fucked. If you're -4,
exactly.
you're fucked.
Yeah.
If you're a positive or a negative, you're done.
Yep. But you also have to be able to create that silence for yourself too. And I'll tell you again, the time that I broke, and I know we're kind of closing out here, the time that I broke on our back porch, I kept telling her, it's just so quiet. Quiet for me has always led into chaos. But if I can see it, if I can work through it, I can deal with the chaos.
Right.
But the trigger for me has always been silence, because
So the trigger is silence.
for me it is. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because that's when you knew you had to
think about if you were sitting at so I'll give you an example. When she died, and I don't know how much time we have left, but when she died, I'd just come back from the gym. I was in PT shorts and a brown t-shirt and my combat boots. No weapon, no flak vest, no helmet, no nothing. Quiet. All of a sudden, mortars started falling out of the sky and bullets started flying. I didn't go to my chew. I got my guys to safety. I saw her fall and ran out into the middle of a firefight.
Still no weapon.
Nothing. And then I got into it with a warrant officer afterwards because I didn't have my shit. It's a whole different conversation for a different day. But it was quiet. Every bit of chaos in my life that became a life or death situation started with silence.
Ugh.
And so quiet scares me.
Yeah.
So I always have white noise, but if I'm able to identify it, if I'm running at a 6 and I can see it, I can navigate it.
Right.
It's when it catches me off guard. It's when everything else is building up and then it goes quiet. I'm like, fuck, here it goes.
Here we go.
Yep.
God damn.
Yep.
All right, so the way that we wrap up every show, and we went through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And dude, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for being open, for letting me ask certain questions. And being very, God, I'll be honest, like I'm tired of the fucking word authentic, just because like I've been saying it for so goddamn long, but it truly is applicable here. I appreciate you being authentic and like sharing the real you and like what you went through and everything. What I always ask guests at the end of every episode is like, there's always something I either kind of forgot or something that I know that you want to make sure that you leave everybody with. So I want to give you the floor. If there's anything that you want to make sure that people take away from what we talked about.
I think I think we hit on everything, honestly.
Okay.
My big thing is always that don't minimize your own bullshit because you don't think it compares to somebody else. Whether that's trauma, whether that's stress, whether that's anxiety. Because leaders won't show you their shit, right? But they've been through it or they're currently dealing with it. And I need to know the people that are looking at me in that position trust me with everything, right? So don't minimize your shit, your trauma, your depression, your anxiety, because you don't think that it's comparable, that I can relate to it, that I might be able to help, or that you're gonna feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Talk about your shit. There's too many people committing suicide. There's too many people living in a fucking basement because they can't rationalize their own stuff. That's leadership to me, is leaving an impact on people. I'm open. You can fucking call me whenever. I will talk to you at 2 a.m. I will talk to you at 6 in the morning over coffee. I will tell you, fuck that guy, he doesn't believe in you. I got you.
Yeah.
Talk to people.
I think that's the challenge to leave everybody with is I think that sometimes as leaders we can't figure out who we can safely talk to. Right? Because there's a lot of people around us that we legitimately can't burden with some of that stuff because then it will create more chaos, right? And it's trying to figure out who can I have those conversations with, and that's why I think that it's such a bad idea that if you're a leader and you don't have a coach or a mentor or somebody that you can go to that is an equal or greater than you human that you can share those things with, to be able to relate, because like an employee can't relate, right? You can't,
and they shouldn't.
And they shouldn't,
right? Yeah.
And you can't have that conversation. You need to find other like-minded individuals in your space that you can sit down with to have those conversations, because that's the only way we're going to get through everything that we're all going through, because we are all going through the same fucking shit.
Yeah, and your ego can't stop you from having those conversations.
And I have a giant fucking ego.
Yeah, and if you can do it, everybody can do it.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I have a giant ego. I mean, we all do to a certain extent of, I don't want to share that and burden humans with it, because then I'm going to be judged. And the thing that people have to remember is that here's the reason why you're not going to be judged, because that person that you're talking to has went through the exact same fucking thing. And it's why you're not going to be judged.
Yeah, and people who want you to be successful are never going to judge you.
No.
People who are going to judge you are people who in 5 years you're going to be like, well, I guess they're still doing the same shit.
Right. I love that.
So.
Daniel, thank you so much for being here. Yeah. I appreciate the shit out of you. I'm looking forward to our next interview that we're going to do in a few hours.
Right.
But thank you for being here. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. If you didn't get value out of this, I don't know what the fuck's wrong with you. Please share this shit. We do not have sponsors, even though we're trying to get Zen for all of your nicotine needs. It's fucking delicious. Share this shit. Share it with people. They need to hear stories like this. And remember, everybody, be authentic or get the fuck out.
Be authentic. Get the fuck out if you can't be authentic. Get the fuck out if you can't be authentic. Yeah. Swipes.